Welcome to The Facts. I'm Mike Osted. Our guest this week is Doyle Turner from the northwest Iowa town of Moville. Mr. Turner is a former financier, former farmer, and banker. Doyle Turner, welcome to The Facts.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate you having me.
What got your interest, you developed over the years, in carbon dioxide and pipelines? What led you to where we're at today with a lot of the issues of the pipelines?
I had an investment years ago in a small company that was selling CO2 for everything and anything, including for beverages and for oil recovery. And they weren't a very profitable company, but they were making a lot of money selling CO2. So I knew that the CO2 had value. So I purposely searched out companies that would possibly take this CO2 and add value to it.
In the climate right now, there's property rights, pipeline transports through your neighborhood in the Sioux City area, through Iowa, through South Dakota, into North Dakota and elsewhere. You've developed ideas and plans to keep the product in the ground, in the area, and add value in our own states and local regions. Tell us how you've developed that and ideas of where the trend is actually going and not just shipping CO2 to other locations.
Yes, Mike, I found a company called Carbon Sink LLC, and they take the CO2 and they take water and they divide it into the hydrogen and the oxygen, and they mix the hydrogen with the CO2 to make methanol. That methanol, the main purpose of that today is for the shipping industry. Large container ship companies need that because the EU has forced the shipping container ships to stop using diesel fuel, and methanol is that fuel of choice at this point in time. So we in Woodbury County have had two pipelines, Navigator and Summit, that were supposed to go through our industrial park, and I convinced them to look at our industrial park for a mega site where they would hook onto the pipeline and take all of the CO2 that came through our county from Nebraska and make it into methanol. So
the European Union and other large nations are trending that way now. So methanol is the shape of things to come for these shipping and transports?
Yes.
So the demand is going to increase?
Yes.
How is the advantage of that in your neighborhood, in your backyard of wherever town or wherever ethanol plant? How will that help compared to maybe the trend of sending CO2 to a pipeline somewhere else?
Well, 1 bushel of corn currently in an ethanol plant produces 3 gallons of ethanol, 16 pounds of dried distiller's grain that we use mostly for cattle feed, and then 1 gallon of corn syrup. If we add the methanol process to that, then we also get an additional 2 gallons of methanol from that same bushel of corn. Well, that's a 66% increase in fuel production by quantity, but it's an even greater amount by dollar value because the methanol is worth more than the ethanol. So this could be a huge opportunity for our state and local governments and for our local economies where these ethanol plants are located to continue to add value. This is really a symptom of a larger problem, which our states do. We produce all of these natural resources like corn and beans, and we export them as corn and beans. Our wealthy counties in Iowa import corn because they have so much livestock that they feed. Our poorest counties are our largest exporters of corn. We need to add value to that corn so that we have more of our counties that are making greater amounts of money. Sioux County in the Northwest is one of our very successful counties. They sold nearly $2 billion of agricultural products. When you divide that by the number of tillable acres in their county, that's over $4,000 an acre. You don't make that kind of money by selling corn and beans. To compare that to the county that I'm in, we're making about $850 an acre. We don't even need a comma. So it's really one of those deals where we have to take every commodity we can and add value to it. I like to compare it to Africa. Africa is the wealthiest continent in the world for natural resources. They have more than any other continent. Japan, the country of Japan, has almost no natural resources. But if you add all of the country's GDP in Africa, it's only 57% of the GDP of Japan. So I want our states to move away from this Africa form of economy and add value to it, like what Japan's doing to other people's assets.
And you're talking about economically building plants, adding jobs in the backyard of the states and not transporting them out to, say, a foreign comparative like Japan, as the states being the Africa with the rich resources, shipping it away on a pipeline. Is that?
Right, exactly.
Are there companies in the ethanol industry that are trending towards the methanol?
So to give you an example, Cargill, which is a very large producer of ethanol, never did sign up for a pipeline. Now they're one of the largest privately held companies, so they don't have to tell us exactly what they're doing. And believe me, I've tried and I wasn't able to. But I can tell you what they are doing. They are taking their ocean-going vessels and they are switching them over to methanol. So I think it's pretty logical that they're probably looking down the road at adding value to their own CO2 rather than putting it into a pipeline and help service their own needs in their ocean-going vessels for methanol.
So what is the incentive now, or the regulation or the factors for pushing the pipeline when people might not, companies and developers might not see the advantage? Why is the trend continuing to be on the pipeline?
Well, we've gone from 3 pipelines and we're really down to 1 now. Navigator dropped out and Wolf has suspended, they may reapply, but that puts us with Cargill, ADM, Poet, and Valero potentially not having pipelines. Well, those are some of the biggest producers in this game. And if those producers figure out that they can add value to their CO2, then the smaller, more private, more locally owned ethanol plants, many of which are on Summit's line, if they can't add value to their CO2, then they are not going to be able to compete with these large companies that are. And those plants will never shut down. The demand for ethanol is very strong. However, the ownership will most likely change.
Very interesting. We'll be right back after these messages on the facts. Welcome back to The Facts with Doyle Turner, CO2 expert. Mr. Turner, South Dakota seems to be trending away from some opportunities that could be had with carbon dioxide capture and transport. We talked a little bit about that in the previous segment. What are some of the things that we can do to get that changed?
Well, one of the things that I really don't like is when they call it waste CO2. CO2 is a very valuable commodity, and with what's being proposed with sequestration is really just a fancy word for landfill. They're taking a value commodity, just dumping it in the ground when it could have value added to it, and that is where I believe we need to go to further our economies.
What kind of jobs and plants, and how can you, and would that be along the corridor of all the ethanol plants, or is there certain locations where you could capture the methanol?
So the main, after I found out that, talked to them about the one in Woodbury County, they actually told me that there's no real economies of scale to having a mega plant that handles all of this at one place, that it is actually more efficient to put it at each ethanol plant and have every ethanol plant produce the methanol right alongside the ethanol. So when I found that out, then I started going to different county boards of supervisors that had ethanol plants in them and giving them letters of intent first from Carbon Sink LLC and then Cap CO2 is another company that found out about this, and they went ahead and asked me if I would do it for them. So I've given these different counties options, more than one company that can actually come in there and produce jobs and increase their tax base and create economic activity with what most people consider to be a waste product.
So, in your experience with financing, would these separate plants that produce the methanol be an advantage and motivation for the ethanol plants themselves, or would it be individually managed? Or
It's actually better for the, it creates two income streams for these ethanol plants because unlike the pipeline, these companies actually buy the CO2 from the ethanol plant, and then they will hire the ethanol plant to run the methanol plant, which doesn't have a lot of moving parts. And you'd be looking at between 7 to 12 extra employees in your typical ethanol plant. Takes about 10 to 15 additional acres. You won't be able to tell where one plant starts and the other one ends. And this is just another way to add value and keep our local economies going.
how about water resources or power or things that would be required to run these additional operations for methanol?
It requires about 20% of the water of the ethanol plant. So if an ethanol plant is going to use 250 million gallons of water, it's going to require about 50 million gallons. However, about 40% of that water will actually go back to the ethanol plant to lower their usage. So net, it's actually really close to the same amount of usage that the pipeline itself uses in order to run the pipeline.
So that water can be reused and reclaimed. It's not just gone into the process.
Right, correct. So rather than using water for the pipeline project and getting nothing out of it, this way, the pipeline is completely funded with tax dollars. And they're just digging a hole in the ground and dropping a valuable asset in there. There is very little economic benefit to that. But by spending tax dollars to create a product that we can sell and create infrastructure that will actually produce something, that is what enhances that economy much more than using a landfill type technique.
Are you gaining traction in certain counties or states? And is it coming more favorable for this methanol production, or is there some resistance, or what? How is it going in certain areas?
It's very mixed. There are counties that are very excited about this. There is CAP CO2 is in the process of building their first plant in Illinois, and people are really excited to see how that works. There are people that are nervous about it from a standpoint of water usage, but we're going to have water usage either way we go. At least this way we get a product built from it.
Okay. We'll continue in our next final segment with Doyle Turner on the facts. Welcome back to the facts. In our final segment, we're with Doyle Turner talking about the very important opportunities with carbon dioxide, CO2 development, and value added in our own states. Let's expand on that, on some of the things and the incentives and subsidies that are happening right now that are pushing states and developers in the direction they are.
So in the Inflation Reduction Act, there's 45Q that pays $85 a ton for sequestration, $60 a ton for alternative uses, and $60 a ton for enhanced oil production, what we know as fracking. There's also 45Z that pays for when an ethanol plant gets their carbon index score below 50, they pay 2 cents per gallon for every point below 50 for every gallon that the ethanol plant produces. That was the big carrot that they used to get these ethanol plants to sign up for these pipelines, was because they could lower their carbon index score. Well, by using the methanol plants, we can lower their carbon index score also, but we can also give them income streams above and beyond just the subsidy money. The other one that most people don't talk about is 45V, as in Victor. 45V is a hydrogen subsidy. So for every kilogram produced of hydrogen, 45V pays $3. Well, I had to look it up. I'm not an expert on the metric system. $3 a kilogram is $3,000 a metric ton. That's where the real subsidy is. So Navigator actually admitted to one of our county board of supervisors that eventually all of the methanol, all of the CO2 that they are taking is going to be produced into methanol, because that is the large subsidy they're really after.
So that capture out of state goes to value somewhere else, to foreign investors, foreign companies, and is completely away from the state. The real money is to capture it in your own backyard, in our own state, with methanol production that works here?
Yes, yes.
So there's a lot of costs that were being overlooked, and savings and revenue stream.
Right. The other thing that we need to figure in is if these ethanol plants are able to add value to that CO2 and increase their income stream, it makes them a much more stronger purchaser of our corn. It could easily raise our corn price. But the other advantage is methanol is a large component to our soybean production, and by having green methanol for our biodiesel plants with our soybeans, we can also add value to our soybeans as well. So, you know, when most of our farmers are planting 50-50 corn and soybeans, it's a big advantage to be able to have a chance to increase the value of 100% of our acres rather than just 50%.
What is the incentive for these companies not getting on board, these ethanol companies now, to get on board with local methanol production?
There are a lot of them that want out of the contracts that they've signed with Summit. They're afraid of being sued, which it's sad that they're doing business with somebody that they're afraid of, but Summit has shown plenty of evidence that they are willing to sue anybody and everybody. We have multiple counties and multiple townships that they are having trouble with, that rather than sitting down and negotiating with people, they go straight to the lawsuit. So that is one of the problems that these ethanol plants have when it comes to, can they get out of the contract with Summit? And we need to be supporting our ethanol plants so that they can get out of this and add value to their CO2.
So when you talk about that solution to help them or supporting the local ethanol companies, how is that done? What steps can be made?
A lot of it is, first of all, educating people so that they understand that we have alternatives, understanding that the big lie that's being out there that ethanol can't survive if it doesn't have pipelines, that was a lie a year ago and it's still a lie today, and that we have to have the people who are running our ethanol plants understand that the people are behind them if they do decide to break away from Summit. I know there are escape clauses in their contracts. All of those large contracts have escape clauses. But it can also be very expensive to break away from a company that shows that they're willing to sue over a lot of things.
Do you see that support, or maybe is it a good quality support in the here and now for people to move that direction to methanol development? Is the word getting out? Are landowners happy to hear of these things, of local production?
I have a lot of landowners that I talk to that have not heard of this. It's a lot different as you go across. Iowa seems to have more knowledge about things like this than, say, North Dakota does. I was at a meeting last week in North Dakota, and it appeared that nobody had heard anything about this. So it seems like we still have educating to do. But also, North Dakota isn't really where the ethanol plants are at. That's where the sequestration is going to take off. So their fight is a little different than ours down in Iowa. But the safety is an issue. with a company that doesn't own a pipeline, has never built a pipeline. It's really kind of concerning that a truck driver coming through the port of entry of these states has a higher burden of proof to prove that he can operate that truck than it appears a company that's building one of the most dangerous pipelines and such a long distance has. We need to support our ethanol plants so that we also don't have to deal with these unsafe pipelines.
Are there any promotional or organizations or any ways you suggest people get involved?
I am with freesoil.land, and you can go to their website and look, and we're fully expecting that after the IUB gets done that we will have to raise money for court cases. So if you feel so inclined to protect property rights, please donate to our organization to fund the attorneys to take this all the way to the Supreme Court if necessary.
Okay, thank you, Doyle Turner from Moville, Iowa, offering lots of good solutions and value added on carbon dioxide. Thank you for being with us here on The Facts.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching, and tune in next week for more of The Facts.